Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. Okay, what's going on, guys? This is Rob, and you're gonna have to bear with me on this with regards to probably some echo, maybe some background noise. I am in Columbus now, and I am not really in a sound-treated space, so I'm just kind of in a kitchen recording this audio. So yeah. Anyway, so we're picking up with X-Men issue number 5, right? We still need to kind of get back into the swing of things, you know, cover like X-Force and Excalibur and all that kind of stuff, and we'll get back into that. But for right now, we're taking it relatively easy this week, and we're going to cover X-Men issue number 5. Now, what this does, and this is something that I kind of need to clarify, in previous videos, I feel like I was confusing Children of the Vault with Children of Tomorrow, and I probably was. The Children of Tomorrow were from the Ultimate Universe, right? And we covered that during Jonathan Hickman's, The Ultimates. We covered that. You'll find the link to that down in the description. It's not super important to this video, just kind of clarifying things, but the idea was that Reed Richards, at least Ultimate Universe Reed Richards, had constructed a city that basically allowed time to pass differently, and the result was that what this did is it created a kind of space whereby he could essentially create life, watch that life evolve with rapid acceleration, right? So time passed totally different in that area. With this, with the Children of the Vault, that was Mike Carey back in 2006, right? Now, really, you have what was called the Supernova storyline that really kind of introduced the Children of the Vault back in X-Men Volume 2, issue number 198, I think it was. And basically we kind of got this little bit of a story with them, and then they were almost never referenced again after that, right? Now, a lot of that was because of what Joe Quesada and all those guys were doing, you know, like Rick Remender and Craig Kyle and Chris Yost and Ed Brubaker and all those guys, really kind of like reworking the X-Men mythos post House of M. And so because of that, it was kind of like, all right, so let's just kind of see what happens. And so it was really focusing more on reducing the population of mutants and then focusing on those particular stories. But for Mike Carey's Supernovas event, what we ended up finding out was that somewhere along the line, there was this giant space, much like what we saw later on with Jonathan Hickman's Ultimates. There was basically this kind of city, this sort of vault that was constructed, and time passed differently in the vault, and it basically allowed individuals, or allowed kind of a creation of these children. And the idea behind this is that these children would evolve over the course of 6,000 years. It was something along those lines. Basically, they would exit the vault at a time when humans and mutants no longer existed on Earth, and they would basically be these kind of post-humans that would basically kind of take over the landscape. The result of this is that by the machinations of Sabretooth and the House of M event itself, they ended up being woken up early. And so when they did, only 5 of them showed up instead of the thousands that were supposed to, and you basically got the Supernova storyline. Now, for how this pertains to this, what we end up doing here is picking up with a girl named Serafina. Now, Serafina was one of the Children of the Vault, and really the most notable in the Supernovas event because of the kind of powers she possessed, right? She demonstrated the ability to dominate the minds of others. She was also able to shield herself from telepathic detection as well as Cerebro, right? So she was basically invisible to the mental eye. I'm pretty sure it was a naked eye as well, but nobody really knew that she was inside the X-Men mansion. But what we end up having here is basically Serafina, who's essentially running for her life after, you know, basically having been discovered during the original House of X and Powers of X story with the Orca space and so on and so forth, and having somehow managed to arrive back here on Earth, and then basically taking off. You know, she's fleeing for her life and then takes over the minds of a couple people and basically says, stop that man from chasing me, only for us to find out that it's Wolverine, right? Now, the reason why this matters is because the Children of the Vault are as much an enigma to the X-Men as anything else. And so while the X-Men do view them as a credible threat, they also know almost nothing about them, except for the fact that whenever they leave the vault, it's always done in groups, and that's basically it. They don't really know anything about the Children of the Vault, and it's kind of a desire to understand what's going on, as well as determine whether or not they're a credible threat. And so the result of this is that, of course, these guys run up on Wolverine. Wolverine doesn't really kill him, he just kind of incapacitates them, and then goes on the hunt for the girl, only for her to enter the vault. And initially, when this story was released, I was looking through the issue, I didn't really know, I recognized Serafina, but I didn't really know what all was going on here. And it's not until Wolverine basically chimes in with the X-Men and then asks, are you guys still there? And it's like, yes, we're here. And it's like, she took off into the vault, like, we can't find it, right? We can't track her, and we can't go in there. Now, the reason why this is important is because the vault does have a physical seal, right? It does have a physical entrance, but it also has a time shear, basically meaning if your body doesn't exist to the resident hum, more or less, like if it doesn't really match the access code to get into the vault, then essentially it could kill you, right? It could destroy you. And so you kind of have to be designed or engineered in such a way to where you can enter the vault, right? So it's like knowing the passcode to be able to get in. And so because of that, what the X-Men basically need are a group of people who can adapt to pretty much any circumstance and then enter into the vault itself. Now, one other thing to point out here is that this vault is basically housed by a gigantic Sentinel. Now, the reason why this matters is because this is essentially Master Mold, but it's not just any Master Mold, it's the Wild Master Mold. Now, this is one of the reasons why Jonathan Hickman's X-Men run is so cool, because it really kind of taps into a lot of the things that were going on. Now, the reality of this is that with this giant vault, more or less, this giant Sentinel, this was part of Mike Carey's run, right? This is where the Children of the Vault basically retreated to once it was all said and done. But the giant Sentinel here, this giant master mold is essentially a wild Sentinel. And this was introduced during Grant Morrison's E is for Extinction storyline, right? With Cassandra Nova, this idea that somewhere along the line that Bolivar Trask had basically engineered these kind of wild experimental Sentinels, but they were never actually used. The Sentinels that existed in this space on this island, these wild Sentinels, they were used by Cassandra Nova to wipe out 16 million mutants on the island of Genosha, right? So that's where all that comes from. This guy Master Mold was the one who was basically engineering and creating them, right? Just kind of manufacturing these things. Now, as far as we're aware, the Master Mold isn't really functional anymore. It's just kind of a giant shell of a monster, and the vault kind of resides within. But what this does, it really kind of allows us to basically pick up with when an approved organism enters into the vault. And when it does, the vault basically scans them and says, like, do we recognize you? Do we not recognize you? If we recognize you, we welcome you as a friend and you're able to enter the vault. Presumably, if we do not recognize you, you're treated as an enemy. And so what it does is it jumps over to the X-Men. This is one of the things that's really kind of important here because it sort of establishes how the vault works insofar as time flowing differently. Now, we're not really given a ratio, right? We're not really told for every 2 days that passes, like 100 years pass inside the vault, right? It's just time passes differently, totally different from the way time normally works here, you know, outside of the vault in the real world. And so as a result of that, it's one of those things where telepathy and none of the technology of the X-Men can penetrate the vault, but they need to know what's going on inside of there. And so what they've done is they've assembled a group. They've assembled Darwin, Sync, and X-23. Now, the reason why this is important is because Darwin, as a lot of you guys probably know, is a mutant whose ability allows him to adapt to any situation, right? So if you were to put him in a pod and then just shoot him out into space, then his body would adapt to the ability to breathe in space. If you put him underwater, his body would adapt to the ability to breathe underwater, which coincidentally is actually how he first discovers his powers. It's one of these things, right? You put him in a room with toxic gas, he'll develop the ability to basically filter that gas out of his body and then survive in that particular space. The guy is an Omega level mutant because of that, right? There's no real conceivable way to actually kill Darwin. With that, you also have Sync. And Sync is an old school character, right? Sync originally debuted the old X-Men Volume 2 comics in the early 1990s and then went on to become one of the original members of Generation X. Now, in Generation X issue number 70, he ended up dying, and so he's really been out of the landscape of Marvel Comics since 2000, right? So for about 19 years, he'd basically been gone. Him being brought back is part of those resurrections that were done by the Five, right? That's what Jonathan Hickman has really been doing with the Five, is basically resurrecting all the mutants who have died. But Hickman's not really doing it arbitrarily. He's kind of staging it out, right? Like, you know, is there a reason for this mutant to be here? If there is, resurrect them. If not, leave them dead until we need them, and then we'll resurrect them, right? So Sync is a character who can basically duplicate the powers of pretty much any other mutants. And then of course you've got Laura Kinney X-23 with her healing factor. And so because of this, what they're basically told is you guys have all been chosen because you can all adapt to pretty much any particular circumstance. The healing factor of X-23 would allow her to basically heal from the time shear, right? The idea that time shear would try to cut off their access, she can kind of push her way through it. Darwin and Sync can really adapt. You know, Sync can adapt to the powers of X-23 so he can enter, and then Darwin can just automatically adapt to whatever particular situation he needs. Now, the other part of this is that aside from Serafina, the other 5 members of Children of the Vault are basically dead, right? Like, it seems like, you know, for the most part, pretty much everybody's dead, but the other 4 members are dead, right? So Sangre, Pero, I don't know if it was Aguya, I'm not 100% sure how you pronounce that name, and then Fuego, they were all basically dead except for Serafina. She's the only one who's still there. And so with her basically returning, it's okay, she's here, you know, she's basically returned to the vault now, and then from that point, the vault starts going through and saying, okay, it's time to start upgrading people. You know, from there, the vault really kind of does exactly what the X-Men have been doing, which is restoring those individuals who have died, and then in turn upgrading them, right? So preparing them for this new kind of threat that the X-Men seem to represent. And so what the X-Men do is they launch an attack seemingly on 2 fronts. The first one is basically going to serve the purpose of kind of being a distraction. The vault's defense system will kick in when it recognizes a threat. And so the X-Men will show up and they'll present themselves as a credible threat. The vault will see them that way, and then the vault will launch defense mechanisms. But what the vault will do is focus on them and not focus on the kind of wet work team, more or less, right? The secret team, in the sense of X-23, Darwin, and Sync. And so as they make their way to that location, they're able to, of course, access and get into the vault. But once they get inside this space, the issue they run into is, of course, all communication is basically cut off, right? It's like a closed biome. In a lot of ways, the vault is akin to like a different dimension, right? Like if they had entered into the dimension of Asgard, then like access to any real telepathic connection from Xavier would essentially be cut off, right? Or like traveling to a different universe or something along those lines. Mutants, it really is completely self-contained and completely cut off from everything and everyone else. Because by it being a system that basically uses a kind of time manipulation, basically means that it's almost out of phase, out of sync with the existing main Marvel universe. The issue with this is that once the team basically enters into the Vault, then it turns into, okay, the Vault sees them as a credible threat, right? Basically the Vault has been quote unquote contaminated. It doesn't know who these guys are. It doesn't know what their powers are. And so it automatically begins launching its defense system. And so what you end up having is much later, roughly about 3 months and 5 days after the X-Men enter the Vault. And when they get in there, Cyclops starts talking to what looks like Charles Xavier, watching everything go down. And when he says like, how long has it been? Of course, you know, Xavier, whoever this is, says, you know, 3 months and 5 days. And so how long has it been inside of the Vault? And it's roughly 537 years have passed inside that Vault. Now, what this means is that when it comes to these characters, this is actually a really, really smart move by Hickman. If what Jonathan Hickman wants to do is change the powers of X-23 or change the powers of Synch or change the powers of Darwin, right? To like elevate them and make them more powerful than they were before, this is the way to do it. Because what he would basically say here is that they've evolved. It would just say over the course of the last 500 years, their powers have evolved, right? So it's like if they lived for 500 years in the real world. So over 3 months, they probably could have gotten stronger, faster. Maybe their powers are more potent. Maybe the healing factor of X-23 is more efficient. Maybe the powers of Darwin are more extreme in what he can and can't copy. Maybe now it's molecular manipulation. We don't really know. We won't really know until they exit from the Vault. But it's kind of Cyclops sort of looking at himself and saying, what in the hell was I thinking by sending them in there? But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoy this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace. Okay, I want to give a shout out to Kyle B, David Joseph, Ben, John H, AJ, Matt N, Jeff R, John H, Lean and Mean, which is an awesome name, Jason C, Austin S, Austin H, Joey M, Steven Z, Austin B, Adam K, and Genosis 916. Remember, guys, you can send me messages and I'll run off whatever your message is at the end of the video, so long as there's nothing crazy. But if you want to put a message in there, send me an email, rob@robertjefferson.com. And if you are one of these people who gets shout outs, then I will tack it in there. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys.